everyone, John here from All Miniatures Great and Small, and I thought I'd do a quick Q&A channel update. I've been wanting to do this for a little while. I finally got some time to sit down and have a chat with you guys. So, just to let you know what's kind of new with the channel, what we're working on. Well, one big thing that's happened is Jake is moving on to, he's going to California and pursuing his dreams, and so we won't be seeing him quite as much on the channel as we usually do. That said, we live in Arizona, he's in California, he's only 4 hours away, so I imagine we're still going to be seeing Jake quite a lot on the channel, and so you don't need to worry about him disappearing anytime. That said, too, we do have a backlog of battle reports for Jake and I as well, so you're gonna be seeing Jake quite a bit as well. The nice thing, though, is with COVID finally easing up and the restrictions easing up, some of the regular AmGas players are going to be able to actually play more often. So folks like Jacob and Mark and Sam and Deshaun, those guys that you've seen in the past, we'll probably have on the channel soon again. I know I have a game that's yet to come out from with Jacob and I think I have a Team Yankee game with Mark that still needs to be published. So there's tons of good content, and we have more with different players here at AmGas. So I wanted to let you know that. On the plus side of Jake leaving is kind of sad because if you don't know, Jake is my son, and he's been playing miniature games with me ever since he was little, and he has been a great companion and friend, and him moving on is very exciting for our whole family, that he's following his dreams and working as a photographer and cinematographer in California. But it was also sad here, not just at the channel but as a family, that he's not here anymore. But on the plus side, we emptied out his room, and I'm converting that into a dedicated filming and painting space. So you might have seen some of the videos of me talking about the new space and what I'm doing. I'm still in the process of moving everything in, so not everything's where I want it. Tons of things need to be organized, but we're getting there, and we have that video series, so if you want to follow the game room conversion, you certainly can. It's nothing special, but it's nice to be able to play off in a area that's enclosed where I can control sound and all that good stuff without having to worry about disturbing the rest of the family and vice versa. Alright, so that's some of the exciting things. What we're covering really hasn't changed much. Some of the major projects, obviously we are continuing full bore with Flames of War. We realize that's what most of you guys like the most. Team Yankee is up there. We also have some of those secondary games like Battletech Alpha Strike, Black Seas, the sailing game. I'm still painting up American Civil War for the Black Powder Epic American Civil War game from Warlord. So there are a lot of cool things out there. Plus there's just a ton of old games that I'd love to see hit the table as well. Just off the top of my head, I'd love to film an Ogre battle report, Steve Jackson's Ogre, giant cybernetic tanks in a futuristic battlefield. Starfleet battles, or more accurately, Starfleet A Call to Arms, which is the simplified version of Starfleet battles. So Star Trek ships. Star Wars, Legion, Armada. Boy, there's so many games out there, and my heart wants to cover them all, but I know I just don't have the time to give them all that they deserve. But I still like to visit all those games and share them with you. Alright, so that's still going on. The latest projects, if you saw what's on the table, I am working on West Germans right now for Team Yankee. I am still painting those American Civil War guys, and I do have some cool new Battletech models that I'd love to slap some paint on. So those are what I'm currently working on. So what I wanted to do was start having a semi-regular Q&A and kind of involve you guys, the audience, more in what we do at the channel, to get feedback and what you like, what you don't like, that kind of thing. Doesn't always mean I'll do it, but it's good to know what you guys want, and if it's something that aligns with what we want to do and what we like to do and what you guys like, we'll definitely consider doing stuff. All right. That said, so what I did for this first Q&A was ask our patrons on our Flames of War Patreon to give me some questions. So that's just meant to kind of get the ball rolling on this Q&A. So our Patreon, if you guys don't know about it, it's our Flames of War Patreon, so it's Flames of War only dedicated. The patrons get access to a Flames of War battle report that's made just for them every month. So there are already a bunch on there, and more are coming every month. So it's a great place to go to get more Flames of War content. On YouTube, we try to do battle reports once a month, but it might be Flames of War, it might be Team Yankee, it might be something else. Hopefully with COVID being relaxed, I can get more than one battle report a month. But right now, that's about the average. But Patreon is a way to get a dedicated extra Flames of War battle report every month. And it's relatively inexpensive. You can hop on, check what we want, discontinue it if you want, but check out our Patreon. All right, so I got my tablet here. Let me just look and see. I'll just start at the top and go down. Sean asked, one thing I'd love to hear you explore are the key differences between Flames of War games. What makes each era compelling to play? Great War versus World War II versus Oil Wars versus Team Yankee. That's a really great question because I think each one of those time frames adds something. I will say this, I've never played Great War. That's the one game out of these that I haven't played. And Great War, for those who don't know, that's the Flames of War version of World War One. So it's more infantry, artillery focused, but you do have all the cool new, brand new tanks for that time period that are coming out. So first I'm going to say, compare Team Yankee to Flames of War. So I'll start with that comparison. Flames of War is a simulation of World War II. Now, to what degree, that's entirely a person's interpretation. Some people like to call it the game of the movie of World War II, which I think is a great way to look at it. And it feels like a World War II battlefield. You can have static infantry lines, you can have slashing tank attacks, massive artillery bombardments, and it captures the World War II essence. Team Yankee is World War III hypothetical 1980s battlefield. So you have Abrams and T-80s and all kinds of Leopard 2 tanks. And the main difference there is the mobility. Everything in Team Yankee, or most things, primarily what you attack with your tanks, are far more mobile than in Flames of War. So in Flames of War, you might have a tank that moves 10 inches, sure, but if it moves, typically its firing rate is cut in half. If it stands still, it shoots twice. If it's moving, it shoots once. Most modern battle tanks in Team Yankee, the really moving doesn't hinder their shooting at all. They can move 10, some can move 14, and still fire 2 shots on the move, and there's no ill effects to that. And as an example of that, I'm going to go ahead and spoil a game, or at least part of a Team Yankee game. So if you haven't seen our most recent Team Yankee battle report, this is a spoiler for it, but I had some M1 Abrams in my backfield. I thought they were safe to snipe, and my opponent, Mark, was able to drive his T-80s on my side at full speed without any penalty to shooting, and was able to destroy one and bail one or something like that. Basically deal with that platoon. Had that been Flames of War, that wouldn't have been able to happen. And I've been playing a lot of Flames of War, so I just didn't have in my mind that those tanks could move that far without any kind of penalty to shooting. So you do have that. Otherwise, the games are pretty similar. The other big difference in Team Yankee is helicopters. So helicopters are kind of this hybrid of airplane and tank unit. They show up every turn, or at least they're on the battlefield every turn. They don't have to roll to come in like an airplane. They can hide behind buildings, but they can always be shot at. They can't be completely hidden. And that really adds an interesting twist to it. So you really need anti-air to cover your units, or helicopters are going to tear you up. But if you have enough anti-air, it can just hit to a point where airplanes and helicopters just can't get near you without facing tons and tons of dice. So that's kind of a fun mechanic in Team Yankee that you just don't have in Flames of War. The other big difference is in Flames of War, you have obviously much more historical relevance. You're talking about real battles that happened, and a real history, a real campaign. And no matter how hard Team Yankee tries with its fiction based on a Team Yankee novel, It's never going to be as rich or as detailed as real World War II. So if your thing is World War II and accurately recreating battles and units and formations, Flames of War is still, in my opinion, superior. Team Yankee plus side is I notice that we have a lot of veterans that are gamers. And it's really cool in the Team Yankee battle report when I'm discussing Team Yankee. Someone says, oh yeah, I was a crew member on a M1 Abrams in the Gulf War, or, you know, I do maintenance on Apache helicopters. And it brings a relevance to it. Now, some people might not like that, like, oh, I don't want to game the Gulf War because that's a little bit too close to what currently happened. But it's your choice, and some people really like that and game that out. So I think that's the big difference. Within those two, Flames of War and Team Yankee, you were asking about Great Wars, Oil Wars. Excuse me. Oil Wars is basically the Middle Eastern theater for Team Yankee. So you're going to have your Israelis, Iran, things like that. Syria. Those are kind of the forces that you'll find in that book. And so that's an interesting dynamic, but it's just a campaign book or a different theater for Team Yankee. There's also the 6-Day War book, which is like the 1950s Israeli conflict. And that's a little bit different because it kind of straddles Flames of War and Team Yankee. It's kind of right in the middle. So, like, one of the coolest... I had a Israeli army for this. You know, the Israelis still had Shermans. They were super Shermans, but they still had Shermans along with more modern battle tanks like a M48 Patton. So that's a pretty cool dynamic. The other thing would be like early war or mid-war for Flames of War. You have those 3 distinct time periods. Now, 4th edition hasn't really addressed early war yet, except for the initial conversions they gave out at the beginning of 4th edition. But each one of those is an interesting chapter. You know, late war gives you all the coolest, most modern World War II equipment to use. Mid-war, the Americans are just coming in. They're not that skilled yet, but you've got, you know, massive battles. The Tiger tanks are the king of the battlefield. They're so expensive. Early war, which I happen to love, I have quite an extensive French army, is pretty cool because you've got these tanks that would be crap in late war, you know, front armor 2 and 3 and 4. But Germans can still take 88s. There are some cool stuff too. The Char B for the French, Panzer 38T for the Germans. There's a lot of cool kit that's kind of older, but you know, it's fun stuff to play with. So that's a great question, John. I appreciate it, and I hope that helps. All right, next up we've got Michael. Please describe the process for painting German tanks. Be detailed with respect to colors, utilize brand. Okay. I do want to do that. I'll probably do that as a separate video, and maybe a what's on the table. My German, I'm still trying to find a German way to paint German units that I like. Most of the Germans you see on the channel, at least for the last 6 months, have been my friend Jacobs, not Jake, but Jacobs. And he paints his in a particular style as well. Over the years, I have collected Germans here and there, and they're all kind of painted differently. So I haven't hit on a formula I like the best, but the most recent ones, I think that's what I'm going to stick with. So I probably will do a separate video on how to paint Germans. If you like how to paint, let me know down in the comments below. I'm not that great a painter. I mean, I can paint something so that it looks nice on the battlefield, and I'll get compliments, and I'm proud of it. But looking at stuff that other people put up on YouTube that are just stunning, I'm not that type of painter. I don't have the skill set, and I don't have, to be honest, the patience to do it. I probably could have the skill set if I had the patience to do that. But I'd rather paint 10 tanks to a good standard than 1 tank to a Golden Demon standard, if that makes sense. And I know that's just personal preference. Some people like it that way. Some people are painting perfection, and I'm totally envious of those people. So let me know down in the comments below, but I definitely could produce a video for that. Let's see. Randall. one thing I'm curious about, what do you think about 15 millimeter compared to 28 millimeter? You play both scales, so what do you consider your favorite and why? Well, I don't just play 15 and 28 millimeter. I play lots of other scales as well. I think Black Seas is 1/300 scale. I would have to say, oh, it's tough because my mood changes. After I've been painting Flames of War for a month, painting a 28 millimeter figure is like a sigh of relief. It's like, oh, thank you. But on the whole, I would say probably 15 millimeter. And it's not just because I like Flames of War, but 15 millimeter, you get infantry, which are fairly tiny, but still have quite a bit of detail on them. You can tell different types of infantry at that scale. And it gives you, within a decent size, an impression of a platoon. You know, each guy is actually a guy in Flames of War, and each stand has, 3 or 4 or 5 guys on it. So I like that. And also the tanks in 15 millimeter are kind of like a guy in 28 millimeter. They're basically kind of the same size. A tank and a Space Marine, Sherman and a Space Marine are about the same size. So I would consider those both very similar painting challenges. So I guess it's just depending on the system I'm playing. Some scales are better than others. For World War II, I personally prefer 15 millimeter versus 28 millimeter. I just think that's a more epic scale, if you will. Now, some folks like 6 millimeter World War II. They play Team Yankee or Flames of War in 6 millimeter, like what GHQ sells, small micro armor. And that gives you more realistic ranges on the table. But I like 15 mil because it's a good, for World War II, it's a good mix of detail on the infantry and tanks. They're big enough you can not lose your eyesight painting them, but they still give you kind of an epic feel on the battlefield. For something like Warhammer, it's a toss-up. I loved Epic 40K, Space Marine, Adeptus Titanicus. I loved all the small stuff. Hopefully waiting for that to come back. 28 mil is great. The miniatures are just amazing. But I think I like the smaller scale in Games Workshop as well. So there you go. So we'll say 15 mil for this video. And that could change by next time. All right, let's see. Aled. I would like Spearhead deployment covered in more detail. Thanks. So Spearhead deployment's Flames of War and Team Yankee thing. In the beginning of the game, if you have a recon unit, you can actually move your recon unit out of your deployment zone. Now, that really only applies in certain circumstances. Like, even if you can move out of your deployment zone, you can't be within a certain distance of your enemy's deployment zone. And some missions, it's just not possible to drive out of your deployment zone without getting within your opponent's deployment zone or within that distance. Normally that's 16 inches. You can't be within 16 inches of a Spearhead deployment, or your opponent's deployment. So, but it's pretty cool. So you can move, basically I put my scout cars down during deployment. When I put them down, I spearhead them. I move them, a normal tactical move, out. And they can go as far as they want as long as they stay 16 inches away from an opponent's deployment zone. Then, once they're down, they act as almost like an extension of my deployment zone. So next, my opponent places a unit, then my next unit might be tanks. And I could put them by my spearheading unit as long as they observe the same rules, 16 inches away from enemy deployment. But now they could be outside of my deployment area as well. So I create this little pocket of deployment outside of my deployment zone. So it's pretty handy. It's always good to have some kind of spearhead unit, and most scouts have it in your army so that you can take advantage of it, but you can't take advantage of it every battle. That said, defenders can take advantage of it as well. If you are defending one of those missions where you have an objective outside of your deployment area and you've got to get to it quickly before the attacker does, Spearhead's a great way to do that. So, look for those options, but realize that some missions you just can't use Spearhead. It's just not possible, not feasible. And some missions it's just not worth it to drive them out any closer to the enemy. I'll probably have a more advanced how to play for Flames of War, where we cover that in more detail, but that gives you the overview. Okay, Scott says, are you guys in Phoenix, and can I get a game in with you on my next layover? We are we're in the greater Phoenix area. We are in Mesa here, which is a big city right outside of Phoenix. And yeah, if you let me know and schedules align, I'd love to play with someone, and they could come into the studio. We could film it. We can meet at one of our several game stores we have in the area. We are blessed here in the Phoenix area with several fantastic game stores. Only one of them currently carries current stock of Flames of War. Second one has some stuff, but they all have great game tables, and you play whatever you want there. So yeah, let me know if you ever are in the town or up for a game, and if schedules work out. Yeah, I'd love to meet you guys and roll some dice. Just know, as I've mentioned a lot, we're not super competitive here at our channel. We like to have fun. So some players have a different mindset than that, and that's fine. That's their thing. But just know kind of what you're getting at. What you see on the camera when we play, that's kind of what you're getting. So yeah, I would love to meet and play with people. Peter. Deployment. It's a curse. It takes forever, and I don't know what I'm doing or why. Could you maybe have a discussion about it? So I do want to do a separate video about deployment in Flames of War and Team Yankee, because you are absolutely right. You can win or lose the game on a deployment if you're not paying attention to what you're doing or whatnot. In tournaments, I know Jake had a tournament where he went to where he just had a string of people who just really put poor deployment, and he won his games on the first and second turn just by driving onto an objective and the opponent not being able to do anything. So you really can win or lose in deployment. I guess the big thing is, a lot of times you don't know what your opponent's going to have until you're actually standing at the table. But it's not a bad idea to look at the table from your point of view, walk around to the other side, look at the table from their point of view, look at their army, and see what things can hurt you, what things you don't need to worry about, and things like that. One of the things with the Flames of War missions is some missions, if you're a defender, typically you're going to throw down your units first, and then the attacker gets to deploy theirs. Or if you're doing a meeting engagement, you might just go back and forth one unit at a time. So it's really important to know the matches. So if my opponent has Tigers, and I have M10 tank destroyers, I'm going to try to hold off on placing my tank destroyers till I know where his Tigers are going. So I can put them either in a place where they're safe from the Tigers or where they can threaten the Tigers. And you really need to do that through all deployment. If he's kind of stacking all his heavy stuff there, is there an opportunity where I can start deploying stuff on the other side and make a run on that other objective and maybe win the game that way? So there's a lot to consider in deployment, and you're absolutely right. It's you win or lose, and a poor deployment can lead to a sad game. So you want to be careful when you're deploying. That said, you can always overcome a bad deployment through skillful maneuvering, appropriate dashes, stuff like that. But yeah, you definitely can win. Another thing where you can win or lose, that's kind of an aside to this, is when you're playing a mission like a defensive mission or a mission that has reserves. Oftentimes you start with 60% of your force on the table, 40% in reserve. So it's a good idea when you build your list to build your list with that in mind. You might not play that particular mission, but there's a good chance that that type of mission will come up, particularly if you're at a tournament. So you want to make sure your army, okay, these are the ones that are probably going to be in reserve and these ones aren't. Sometimes that'll have to change on the fly, like you typically put your anti-aircraft in reserve, but your opponent has airplanes, so now they're on the front line, they're on the A-team. But, a lot of times having that decided beforehand is a good idea, because you'll see it a lot with us, like Jake and I'll play, and we're still bad at it. It's like we build this list, we roll the mission, and we're like, oh, crud, it's a 60-40 mission. What 40 points am I going to keep off the table? And you agonize over that. All right. So sorry, I got distracted, but yeah, I'll do a separate video on deployment, and probably it's part of the How to Play series, and talk about it a little bit more. All right, Calum. I hope I'm saying that right. Calum. Do you guys each have a favorite nation and/or which source book is your favorite for each nation in Flames of War version 4? I like playing the Americans. That's my favorite nation overall for Flames of War. In early war, it would be the French if we're playing early war, because there are no Americans. I like Fighting First Mid-War. I think the Fighting First is a great book, a great intelligence briefing book, and I think it's the first book that set a high bar. I think the first few version 4 source books, Africa Corps and the Desert one for the British, I thought those were a little lacking in content and options. I thought the Fighting First book, the American book for mid-war, was head and shoulders above those other books as far as content and quality. And I really liked that book, and it just happened to be Americans, which I like to play the most, so that's one of my favorites. The American D-Day book is also great. It is everything I want on D-Day. I know in version 3 we had several D-Day books originally, and this is kind of an amalgamation of everything. You've got, D-1, you've got D-Day, you've got the Breakout Forces, Operation Cobra. It's kind of all crammed in that book, which is nice because it's all crammed in one book. You don't need separate source books for it. So I like that one as well. But Fighting First was probably my first of the books that I actually really liked a lot. And then I've got a video of Jake and his favorite list that he'll talk about now. Jake, what is your favorite army and/or source book in Flames of War?
Well, British. It would have to be. You were always collecting all the Americans, right? So even when I was little, I was like, I couldn't really do the Americans because you wouldn't let me. But so I still wanted to be good guys. So British were the next step, and so I've just been collecting them ever since. But the source book, probably Market Garden. It would be nice if we had one right now.
The version 3 Market Garden book?
Yeah,
that was a good book.
Yeah, that was pretty great. And lots of lists and special heroes. Like, you had a ton of heroes, especially, right, like from the movie. You could pick a lot of those guys out. And the Airborne kit is really great, because you even get the guy, I'm forgetting his name right now, but the guy with the umbrella, like, was always my 2IC. So all that was awesome. But, like, favorite source book was actually, I don't know, it would probably be, like, the Market Garden one, and then what was the last one that came out of the last version that had comets in it?
I don't know. Remagen was the American one. But
yeah, I forget what the British one was called, but we had it for like a couple months, and then it was like already invalid and just kind of moving on. But I really like comets. I think they're the coolest tanks. I really like Cromwell's, so any evolution of that keeps going, that's super cool. And then even I know it was kind of silly, but all the late war stuff for the Germans as well, like Volkssturm. I've always wanted to make a tire army of Volkssturm, even though they're terrible. The models are super cool. There's a guy riding a bicycle with a Panzerfaust on the front of it.
Yeah.
So that was pretty cool. But and right, the Panthers have infrared, I think, by that point, which is just very silly, but I think that's super cool.
All right. Thank you. Last question comes from Caleb again. Do you guys have a favorite war film or TV show? So I've got another video of Jake talking about his. Play that now. Hey Jake, what is your favorite war movie or TV show?
I think it would have to be A Bridge Too Far.
A Bridge Too Far?
Yep, you and I have watched that movie, gotta be like a dozen times by now. But I really like that movie. It would be, I like remakes, so I think it would be cool if they remade that with like modern day technology, but I just really like everything about that movie and the whole operation. I find the whole operation fascinating in that it was the kind of biggest Allied blunder of World War II. And that's why I have the entire British Airborne Army for Flames of War.
And for me, it's a toss-up. When I was little, I loved the movie Midway. And I realize now that there's several problems historically with that. The planes that you see are the wrong planes. That drives me crazy now. But I really enjoyed that movie as a kid. And that really helped pique my interest in historical. Today, if I had to pick one, it'd be tough. Saving Private Ryan obviously is a classic for the D-Day scene. I just rewatched Band of Brothers and forgot how awesome that show is. Maybe when I get out my U.S. paratroopers. I still have a box that Battlefront produced for version 3 that's the characters from the 501st or whatever regiment that was for the Band of Brothers. Easy Company that has all those characters as miniatures, which is pretty cool. That's talking about history right there. So Band of Brothers was awesome. I enjoyed the Midway movie, the recent Midway movie. I thought was really good. There are some glaring historical inconsistencies in that movie that drive me crazy, but it came pretty darn close, and I really like that movie as well. My daughter Kaylee, that would be her pick. She really liked that Midway movie for some inexplicable reason. I'm not sure why, but she did. So I would say it's hard. There's so many good World War II movies out there. Jake, as you listen to, he likes A Bridge Too Far, which is fantastic. I love that movie as well. So there are a lot of movies, but I guess if I had to pick one right now, it would not be Pearl Harbor by Michael Bay. So I'll leave that with you guys. So that's all the questions I've got for today. I do appreciate all of the patrons sending in their questions. I will post here and ask you guys if or all you YouTube viewers, if you have any questions for the next Q&A, please do leave them down in the comments below. I'm more than happy to talk about anything, gaming, personal, doesn't matter. It's just I like talking to you guys. So if you have any comments about my comments, let me know, and just know all my opinions are my own and I don't inflict them on anyone else. So if you hate the original Midway, that's cool with me. I totally understand. So yeah, but let me know down in the comments what you guys think. Any questions at all. And then patrons, I'll post on the Patreon again when we do another Q&A so that you guys can do that. Patrons will get preferential treatment. There we go. And we'll post, I'll answer their questions first and then get to everyone else as time dictates. All right, guys, there. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please do consider giving us a like and subscribe. Click that bell to receive notification when we release new content. As always, thanks for watching and keep on wargaming.